I'm here in Provo, Utah to see firsthand just how Wilson loudspeakers are made in America.
Hi, I'm Corbin, and I'm here to tell you about how a Tunetot is manufactured and the steps involved. So the material arrives at Wilson Audio, and they're in sheets, 4 feet by 6 feet, but some are blocks. We're using these 3 exotic materials, B, X, and S materials. In comparison, some of the other loudspeaker manufacturers are using a typical grade MDF. The raw materials that we use range from 5 times to 22 times in cost. And this machine is doing, basic shapes of the speaker. Even though there are a lot of hand steps later, they're doing the basic shapes that maintain the tolerance for us, which we'll build upon. Here's an example of, some of the machining that's done on one side of an enclosure. And so it's not something that you always see from the outside of a product, but the machine allows us to do steps like this that are important to the form and the function of the Tunetot and each of our products. So after the milling process has occurred, the craftspeople prep parts, they take the necessary adhesive, they're lining up the parts, putting the adhesive on the parts, and using clamps and jigs to assemble the speaker. And now it's taking shape. It's moving from a two-dimensional pieces to a 3D shape. You'll see there's some glue squish, and that's intentional. That's to ensure that it's airtight and any shrink back that may occur. After the cure time of the Tunetot, the clamps are removed. It takes 5 days for that to occur, and Trevin grabs the Tunetot and starts working his magic on the enclosure. Trevin has a standard there where he's replicating what is on the standard with this speaker at this point. And he's using a variety of tools because this material is difficult to work with. So he's using a variety of tools and sandpaper, 40 grit, 80 grit, up to 180 grit. And he's working to ensure that there are flatness in the right areas where it needs to be flat, and then also that the transition points mate from the front of the enclosure to the side of the enclosure. And roundovers are consistent and smooth, so that when the top coat goes on, that it's a smooth surface. It takes about 2 hours to prepare one single Tunetot for the next stage. So once Trevin's completed the fabrication process in the fab shop, it's then moved to another QC station, which is, throughout the manufacturing process, a run number is assigned, and Joe is doing some basic sanding to ensure that roundovers and all of the inspection points have been covered and there's consistency from one craftsperson to another. After it's gone through this QC inspection, it's now ready to be gel coated. Gel coat is a marine grade product that is impervious to water, and we use it as a prime coat. So it's in preparation of the speakers getting the top coats. We have one gel coat booth, which we put a variety of speakers in. We take out pedestals and add in other pedestals depending on what we're gel coating. But we're doing 2 loads a day, so it's about 4 hours per load. And sometimes we're running shifts that go longer than that. The Tunetot then goes in, and all of our speakers go in to be prepped for paint. There's a texture to the gel coat, and that needs to be smoothed out and refined so that it's a smooth glass finish once the top coats go on the speaker. So they're using the same tools in this shop as they do in the fabrication shop. They're just using different grit sandpaper. They're sanding up to a 600 grit finish, and they're using a black guide coat that aids them in defining pinholes and random sand scratches before it gets painted. So after the speaker's prepped for paint, it goes through another QC point by the employee that prepped the speaker. At this point, they're turning on bright lights that replicate the light of the paint booth. They're spinning the enclosure around, and they're wiping it to remove contaminants and do any basic sanding that needs to be done. Brian, our master painter, prepares the booth for painted speakers. He maximizes the loads. He can paint multiple colors at the same time, and he can paint a variety of colors. So we have solid colors, we have metallic colors, we have candy colors, we have pearls, satin finish, gloss finishes, and he can do any of those. The time that it takes to do that could range from a couple of hours up to 8 hours, depending on the complexity of the colors or the finish. The Tunetot we offer in 3 standard colors and 3 upgraded colors. So Brian is utilizing 3 different paint booths in this paint process. They're insulated paint booths that we're able to bake at temperatures to help the curing process. But at this point, there's multiple layers. You have the gel coat layer, you have a sealing layer, you have multiple base coat layers. Depending on the finish, again, you could have candy and pearl and so forth. And then you're gonna have clear coat layers. It takes a long time to do that process, but it also takes a long time to cure. It could take 1 week to cure up to multiple weeks and even months, depending on the finish. So the speakers move to a staging area while they're going through the curing process. That could be a week up to a few months. And as that time approaches, they will grab a speaker and start the polishing process. Now, this sometimes is a surprise to people that we're actually sanding a painted finish. It's not something that you typically think of, at least I didn't until I worked at Wilson Audio. But to get the level of finish that we're after, it is. So you're taking sandpaper, starting with 800 grit sandpaper up to 1500 grit, and you're changing the surface, the way that that looks. And then you're using 2 different polishes to polish that back to a nice high sheen. So you get the gloss back, but this time what's being revealed is there's no longer the orange peel that was there, that was introduced from the process of being painted. Joe receives the enclosure after the polishing has occurred on the speaker. He's looking for any imperfections in it. He's documenting it, whether it needs to go back and be reworked or small imperfections need to be taken care of, or big ones at this point. And he's putting a build tag on it when production's able to build it based on the cure time.
Hello, my name is Daryl Wilson. I'm CEO of Wilson Audio Specialties, and we find ourselves here in the gallery of our 46,000 square foot building. This is where all Wilson Audio products and Wilson Audio special application engineering products are handmade. We've had companies approach us and want to help us with offshoring and producing cabinets in other places, exotic places even. There's a myriad of problems in that we won't get into. It would be easy to look at Tunetot and say, well, it's small. It wasn't an exercise in making something small and cheaper. Tunetot is a distillation of all of our innovations, all of our materials research, our driver research, how we make crossovers, everything that we've learned down to the screws, and we use in our larger products distilled down into just a smaller package. Just because it's small doesn't mean that we're losing content. That was a challenge in developing the product because all those parts and all those pieces, they are expensive, but getting down to how to